I don't know if you've heard, but our world is falling to shit.
Nothing works anymore because we're not looking for people who are good at their jobs. We're just looking for checking boxes.
Our trains are derailing.
Trains derailing? That's fine. You're fine.
Our medical schools are falling apart.
We're ushering in an era of deadly medicine.
Our banks are collapsing.
Another major U.S. bank just collapsed.
And there's only one thing to blame.
Woke diversity practices may have played a role.
DEI.
DEI.
Diversity.
Diversity.
Equity.
Equity.
And inclusion.
Inclusion.
DEI.
DEI. DEI.
Happy DEI Thursday.
For the past few months, right-wing media have been fear-mongering about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, which are essentially policies that try to promote fair treatment in the workplace. Think like corporate diversity trainings and like equal pay and stuff.
Today is Diversity Day, and corporate mandated it.
I actually have a bit of experience working in DEI spaces, and it's not exactly revolutionary theory.
I admire your culture's success in America.
Thank you.
But according to right-wing media, DEI is actually just a cover for an anti-white, anti-male, anti-heterosexual crusade threatening America's institutions.
Diversity, inclusivity, equity, all of those things make up a very toxic brew.
This all sounds so familiar though, like weren't we just saying this with wokeism?
Wokeism, the hateful, intolerant ideology that's captured the most powerful institutions in America.
And like before that, cancel culture.
Cancel culture is everywhere, policing ever-changing rules of what you're allowed to say or hear.
It's always the same formula. Minority groups have taken control. They're silencing anyone who disagrees with them. You can't tell the truth anymore.
Critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion. We're surrounded by this alphabet soup. What does it mean? Where does it come from?
If it feels like they're using the same talking points over and over again, that's because they are. But to understand it, we have to go back. And I mean, way back. Snap. We just like majorly time traveled to the early 90s. I can't wait to give my Furby a Tamagotchi.
Tickle me.
I have no idea, okay? Like this was before my time. So throughout the 80s, marginalized groups are gaining power in American culture. There's a reckoning around sexual harassment in the workplace.
Senator, I would suggest to you that for me, these are more than mere allegations.
LGBTQ people are gaining visibility within the AIDS crisis.
People with AIDS won't be quiet!
And mainstream American television is tackling topics like race and inequality.
If you want Black history, go back to Africa. Tickle me.
There's this growing awareness about the way racial and sexual minorities have been mistreated in this country. I mean, even Doogie Howser MD is getting in on it.
We're not dating. Mark's gay.
And in academia, we're seeing this growth of ethnic and gender studies on college campuses alongside this raging fight over affirmative action.
I can state for the record, Virginia has not come far enough to dismantle affirmative action.
But when there's progress, there's backlash. And when there's backlash, there's usually a bunch of right-wing money behind it. In 1991, the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank funded by a bunch of oil billionaires, published a speech titled Political Correctness and the Suicide of the Intellect. The speech argues that there's a growing epidemic of political correctness in the admission of students and recruitment of faculty, campus life and the demand for sensitivity, and in the curriculum and the criticism of the traditional canon. The paper concludes by telling conservatives to raise a little hell over political correctness on college campuses, and raise hell they do. Starting in the late 80s, a conservative dark money group called the Olin Foundation starts pouring money into propaganda about political correctness. They funded Alan Bloom, who in 1987 wrote The Closing of the American Mind, which blames cultural relativism for the downfall of higher education, and the book becomes a surprise national bestseller. Cultural relativism succeeds in destroying the West's universal or intellectually imperialistic claims, leaving it to be just another culture. The Olin Foundation also gives tens of thousands of dollars to Dinesh D'Souza, a right-wing dweeb who wrote a whole book about how Obama hated America because of his philandering inebriated African socialist father.
This is my interpretation of why, mysteriously, she packed Obama off and sent him home.
Before he was peddling wild theories about Obama secretly hating white people, D'Souza got famous for attacking political correctness on college campuses.
PC, or politically correct points of view, aimed at teaching young people not how to think, but what to think.
In 1991, he publishes his book Illiberal Education, in which he argues A cultural revolution is underway at American universities. It is aimed at a basic transformation of American higher education in the name of multiculturalism and diversity. He's also weirdly concerned about how many black and brown babies are being born.
The recoloring of America. Birth rates of minority groups are somewhat higher than those of whites.
Tickle me.
The Olin Foundation also funds Roger Kimball's 1990 book, Tenured Radicals, which argues, shockingly, that liberal politics were destroying higher education. We have all become familiar with the kinds of foolishness that the demand for multiculturalism and political correctness has brought to our schools and college campuses. The denunciation of Western civilization as inextricably racist, sexist, elitist, and patriarchal. The efforts by college administrations to enforce speech codes on college campuses. The blatant rewriting of history textbooks to soothe wounded ethnic feelings. All are transforming the nature of American society. They're all writing the same book. But it isn't just books and think tank articles. The Olin Foundation is also spending $15 million a year funding conservative magazines like The American Spectator, National Review, and Crisis, which would then go on to publish horror stories about political correctness going too far. Take the conservative newspaper Heterodoxy, for example, which is run by an extreme anti-Muslim group which also received Olin money. Heterodoxy ran a story claiming that the Women's Studies program at Wellesley College sent letters to European history students accusing them of perpetuating the dominant white male attitudes and behaviors that have been oppressing women for generations, which is so PC, but also fully made up. Wellesley didn't even have a modern European history major. They did have a department of scissoring, though. In his book, The Myth of Political Correctness, John Wilson calls this myth-making through anecdote, and cites this horror story which first appeared in the Wall Street Journal in 1989 about a diversity committee at UPenn. A student on that committee had written a memo arguing that they should be more concerned with individual experiences than group experiences, and a professor responded by arguing that focusing on individuals rather than groups can sometimes be a way to ignore racist policies. I cannot stress enough how minor this was. This was a note scribbled on a memo. The administrator didn't take any action to punish the student. They didn't make this note publicly. The only reason we would know about it is because the student complained about it. But that single note became a national story. By 1995, the story was reportedly cited in at least 35 different articles and books about political correctness.
It is an industry. There are all these right-wing foundations and books that were published that made a lot of money promoting this idea.
It wasn't just a propaganda thing, though. Right-wing money also funded lawsuits by students and professors who claimed that they were the victims of political correctness. By 1995, right-wing public law firm, the Center for Individual Rights, had gotten nearly $2 million from right-wing foundations in support of its work bringing lawsuits over campus incidents of political correctness. In one lawsuit, CIR defended a professor who received complaints from students after he responded to a female colleague's article by writing, "I just want to point out that Clutter's easy access to a vagina enables her to quickly and easily have sex with as many random people as she wants." The university eventually found that he hadn't actually violated their sexual harassment policy, but still, thank God he had representation. The point of these horror stories is to create the illusion of a major crisis. A myth is not a falsehood. It doesn't mean that everything is fabricated. It means that it's a story. And so what happened in the 90s is people took certain, sometimes true anecdotes and they created a web, a story out of them. A myth that there was this vast repression of conservative voices on college campuses. And if you pump enough money into myth making, eventually dumb journalists will just start to believe it. Suddenly, political correctness was on the cover of mainstream magazines. Is political correctness policing your thoughts? Is political correctness destroying America? Do you say Indian instead of Native American? Pet instead of animal companion? An educational program on PBS brings on anti-PC activists to fearmonger about political correctness.
Intolerance and witch hunting in the name of political correctness and multiculturalism.
CBS airs an entire segment about how political correctness is ruining TV commercials.
Connie, their critics call them the thought police and say they should lighten up and calm down. But now the politically correct patrol has a new target: television commercials.
Just to be clear, some of the ads that they're talking about there are an airline commercial that features a racist depiction of a samurai, and a cereal ad where a bunch of cowboys threaten to kill a guy for acting a little gay.
What's for breakfast?
Not honey.
No, it's not honey.
Universities start organizing entire public debates over political correctness.
We're here at the University of Pennsylvania, which has been a hotbed of controversy over political correctness. To argue the resolution resolved, political correctness is a menace and a bore.
A menace and a bore. Comedian Bill Maher successfully capitalizes on PC panic by launching a show called Politically Incorrect.
Hi, I'm Bill Maher, and this is Politically Incorrect.
And George Bush literally gives a commencement speech about it.
The notion of political correctness has ignited controversy across the land.
It's hard to overstate how successful right-wing think tanks are in creating a nationwide panic over political correctness. In 1990, there are 65 articles that mention political correctness. In 1991, there are over 1,500. By 1994, there are nearly 7,000. In a 1993 poll from CBS News and the New York Times, 76% said they had heard of the phrase politically correct. Of those who had, 59% said that being politically correct was a bad thing. Books, pamphlets, and strategically placed stories in the media pumped the idea of political correctness as a scourge into the public consciousness. These lies were disseminated by a machine that had considerable funding and therefore profound reach. But unlike Furbies and Tamagotchi, the panic over political correctness isn't a short-term fad. It goes on and on and on. Welcome to the 2000s. Oh, shoot, I totally meant to warn them about 9/11. Over the next couple decades, political correctness evolves from a panic on college campuses into this catch-all term to mock anything that's concerned with social justice.
Well, PC police are on the scene once again. Something called microaggressions are on the rise on college campuses.
This is thanks in part to the birth of Fox News, which starts blaming every tiny social change on the PC police.
PC police?
PC police?
The PC police.
People want to change the Indians mascot.
The PC police strike again.
People are concerned about the safety of kids' toys.
Game over? Why the PC police are taking aim at Nerf guns.
People want to add a couple female characters to Brian Kilmeade's favorite TV show.
A children's classic is the latest victim of the PC police. Thomas the Tank Engine now facing a change some say is off the rails.
Bill Maher's show runs for 10 years, tackling hard-hitting questions like, should white people say the N-word?
Blacks are like, whites cannot say this word. I disagree. Nigga, 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 nigga. People come up to me and go, Bill, you a nigga.
Lazy comedians and show writers started copying Bill Maher's shtick, using political correctness as a cheap punchline.
In a gutless act of political correctness, Pizza Day will now be known as Italian-American Sauce Bread Day.
Just don't. You'll upset the PC babies.
South Park is especially popular for this, thrilling teenage boys with caricatures of liberal snowflakes that are basically identical to what you would hear on Fox News.
Political correctness, it is our enemy at a time of war.
We are at war, but the only way to win this war is to be as understanding, non-biased, and politically correct as possible.
And as the paranoia around PC culture goes mainstream news outlets start taking it seriously too.
Political correctness, it just irks me. Do you think this is political correctness gone run amok?
Well, when does political correctness on campus go too far?
Comedians claiming that political correctness is damaging their art form.
Critiquing a movie about Israeli-Palestinian relations.
Is this film maybe a little too politically correct?
Rutgers University students protest Condoleezza Rice giving a commencement speech.
I mean, you talk about political correctness run amok. This is absolute insanity.
Yeah. Asked to pick Tupac versus Biggie.
Tupac or Biggie?
Tupac.
Really?
Yeah.
I like them both.
Oh, he's so politically correct.
But while Americans are worried about fictional traits with personalities also being women, something serious is happening on the far right.
And Bill, I'll tell you, I mean, it's not politically correct, but I am sick of hearing that Islam is a religion of peace.
I know this isn't a politically correct thing to say, but the truth is, the biggest problem in the black community right now is that we don't have our fathers anymore.
When you let illegal immigrants into a sanctuary city, they don't come in with a card that says, I don't have tuberculosis, or I don't have the flu, or I don't have this disease.
Politically, can you say that? Is there enough correctness in that?
As hatred for political correctness goes mainstream, it evolves from a joke about liberal sensitivity into an outright defensive bigotry.
The problem is political correctness. And this is not the first time that political correctness, when it comes to Islam and Muslims, has gotten us killed, gotten people killed.
This might not be politically correct becomes a kind of catch-all defense before saying something racist or xenophobic or misogynistic or homophobic.
It may not be politically correct, but I'll say it. Many Americans link all Muslims to terrorism.
Everyone gets all politically correct. Ooh, it's like screeching chalk on a blackboard.
This may not be politically correct, but let's just fire all the minorities.
But it's not just a language thing. Political correctness starts being used in defending actual discrimination, racially profiling Muslim Americans.
Everyone wants to be politically correct. I'm sorry, if I see two guys that look like Abba-Dabba-Doo and Abba-Dabba-Da, I'm going to pull them over.
Racially profiling Black Americans.
People in today's society are too politically correct and afraid to talk about violence from Black people on white people.
Accusing women of lying about sexual assault.
In our liberal, politically correct culture, women are often seen as part of an oppressed class.
The problem isn't just oversensitive language policing anymore. It's that people are being asked to consider the perspectives of marginalized groups at all.
Someone called the PC police. Indiana State University now relabeling the family restrooms all gender.
By the late 2010s, right-wing groups report polls like this one claiming that 80% of Americans believe that political correctness is a problem, or this one claiming that 71% of Americans say that political correctness has silenced conversations. Thankfully, a hero is on the way. In 2015, Donald Trump emerges from the swamps of Florida and the sky rises of New York City, unafraid of standing up to the politically correct mob.
We cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore.
Trump's campaign starts with him calling immigrants rapists and criminals. When NBC cuts ties with him over his comments, he slams them as weak for trying to be politically correct. A few months later, he calls for a Muslim ban, dismissing critics with the same argument.
I wrote something today that I think is very important and probably not politically correct, but I don't care.
Trump takes the subtext of the panic over political correctness and makes it explicit. The problem was never oversensitive students. It was that you couldn't just be a bigot anymore.
We have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything.
And right-wing media is thrilled.
The politically correct crowd often fires vile accusations toward those they don't like. Thus, when a guy like Trump actually attacks politically correct madness, he gains devoted followers.
He sure does. After decades of anti-PC propaganda, conservatives view Trump's unleashed bigotry as freedom from the PC mob.
I'm afraid to say what I really feel, because it's not politically correct.
Unsurprisingly, Trump's anti-PC campaign earns the support of other free thinkers like David Duke, KKK Grand Wizard, who says Trump deserves a close look by those who believe the era of political correctness needs to come to an end.
Trump is almost single-handedly burying political correctness and tearing up the left's Saul Alinsky playbook.
And bury it he does, kinda. Trump spends 4 years being openly racist and is defended by the anti-PC crowd.
President Trump gave a historic speech. No apologies, no political correctness.
He enacts the Muslim ban. He calls African countries shitholes. He calls COVID the Chinese virus and the Kung flu. He calls literal white supremacists in Charlottesville very fine people. I don't really need to rehash this, like you were there. It was exhausting. At the same time, Americans are experiencing another reckoning over racial inequality. Protests erupt around the country after the police murdering of George Floyd. States begin removing symbols and monuments to the Confederacy. And when Trump eventually loses re-election, there's a cheeky little riot at the Capitol.
Inside the Capitol, Dunn faced off against rioters carrying Trump signs, Confederate symbols, and even neo-Nazi flags.
Like in the early 90s, there's a shift in cultural awareness about race and inequality in this country. A shift that conservatives already have a tried and true strategy to fight back against. Except that political correctness is feeling a bit worn out. We need a rebrand, a way to breathe new life into the same old talking point.
Cancel culture is real, it's insane, and it's growing exponentially, and it's coming to a neighborhood near you.
Starting in 2020, conservatives have a new catch-all term, cancel culture. This vague fear that you'll be canceled for saying something controversial.
They tried to cancel me. I was spreading conspiracy theories. I was a terrible human being.
And it has all the same elements of the PC panic. Minority groups have taken control.
It's not cancel culture, it's control culture. Leftists control all major institutions in the country.
They're silencing conservatives.
They're gonna come for everything. They're gonna cancel everyone. They're gonna cancel you, they're gonna cancel me.
You're not allowed to to say the truth anymore.
In a world of cancel culture, the truth is irrelevant.
Like with political correctness, the panic over cancel culture is fueled by a hodgepodge of trivial bullshit.
Victims of cancel culture
That's right.
as well.
Paw Patrol, Drew Brees, Aunt Jemima, Chris Pratt, Goya, Nick Sandman, George Washington, Gone with the Wind, the Muppets.
Like with political correctness, anxiety about cancel culture catches on. The term suddenly spikes into the national consciousness in June 2020. Curious timing. It starts showing up in national news.
Our country needs to reduce political correctness and cancel culture.
It shows up on magazine covers, like New York Magazine, which published the harrowing story of a 17-year-old boy who was canceled by his peers for showing a nude photo of his underage girlfriend to people at a party without her consent.
Tickle me.
It shows up on 60 Minutes.
The stage is empty. There is no crowd. The silence speaks of not just COVID, but perhaps an even more contagious force. Fear, thanks to cancel culture.
Grifters write bad books about it.
You know what else you can buy, America? You can buy my book, The Cancel Culture Dictionary, an A to Z guide to winning the war on fun.
And of course, the ultimate indication that it has permeated the stubborn brains of centrist dads across America.
How bad does this atmosphere we are living in have to get before the people who say cancel culture is overblown admit that is in fact an insanity that is swallowing up the world?
It's not just grifter comedians, though. Grifter politicians are cashing in on it, too.
Cancel culture is anti-American. It is like a medieval mob coming to burn witches. That fascist regime then did what this cancel culture is doing now.
And just like with political correctness, the definition of cancel culture starts to evolve too. Cancel culture is when a politician is investigated for sexual harassment.
Andrew Cuomo is fighting back, saying he will not bow to, quote, cancel culture.
Cancel culture is when police are criticized for murdering civilians.
The cancel culture that accelerated after George Floyd's killing is facing some new scrutiny.
Cancel culture is when people choose not to promote the work of an incredibly rich and transphobic author.
A museum taking cancel culture to a whole new level by removing any and all traces of Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling from their exhibit.
Cancel culture gives the political correctness panic a second life, and it's sure working well to stir up the base.
I gotta tell you, a poll just came out that 73% of Americans believe that cancel culture has gone way too far.
And before long, actual white supremacists are using the phrase to defend themselves from criticism.
Everybody keeps telling me cancel culture's over, censorship is over. Really? Because I'm still not on Twitter, and I'm on like one platform, and they're trying to chase me off that one too. Whatever.
Should we, do it again? Should we be bad?
Wokeism, the hateful, intolerant ideology that's captured the most powerful institutions in America.
A few months later, wokeism is the new sexy moral panic, and it uses the exact same recipe. Minority groups have taken control.
It means a woke militia policing our cities, enforcing Democratic Party orthodoxy.
They're silencing conservatives.
Woke activism, it is silencing speech.
You can't tell the truth anymore.
Woke represents a war on truth.
Like political correctness and cancel culture, it's fueled by a bunch of Fox News bullshit.
Harley-Davidson is facing some backlash. The rough and tough American company's going woke.
Lego is going woke.
Woke M&Ms have returned. The green M&M got her boots back, but apparently is now a lesbian, maybe?
The term goes mainstream, with big spikes in use in 2021 and then again in 2022. GOP voters identify it as an election issue.
People would rather hear about plans to combat wokeness in schools and businesses over preventing cuts to Medicare and Social Security.
Mainstream media runs segments like, is wokeness a problem for the Democratic Party?
I get tired of people say they're woke and they're tired of being woke. People want to, after this pandemic and stuff.
Washed-up comedians start using it as a punchline.
No, I have learned my lesson, and that's why I'm going to be woke from now on.
And it goes without saying, Bill Maher rants about it.
Being woke is like a magic moral time machine where you judge everybody against what you imagine you would have done in 1066, and you always win. Just a way to congratulate yourself about being better than George Washington because you have a gay friend and he didn't.
Bill, my guy, George Washington was the gay friend. Before long, the definition of wokeism is expanded to attack all kinds of efforts to address inequality. Wokeism is when people make you acknowledge racism.
We should be moving toward a colorblind society where we don't see race. That's not wokeism.
Wokeism is when kids are exposed to the existence of trans people.
The wokeness that's going on because of the
the transgender stuff they're teaching our kids.
Wokeism is when people welcome immigrants.
The president's very woke base, they are demanding even more illegal immigration.
As Philip Bump wrote in the Washington Post, woke is the perfect pejorative. At times, it refers to misguided overreactions to concerns about the presentation of identity. In common usage, though, it often means little more than raising issues that I would prefer not be raised. It is a distillation of politically correct to the hot button, triggering issues of race, gender, and sexuality.
We're so politically correct. Everyone's woke. We're getting everyone fired for the thought police are out there. I said,
what's that? You want another rebrand? Fuck it, we ball.
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory is critical racism theory.
In 2021, critical race theory is the new amorphous moral panic about liberals in schools, and it's got all of the same beats. Minorities have taken control.
Critical race theory is infiltrating all levels of our society, whether it's the corporate world, whether it's the military.
They're silencing conservatives.
Critical race theory leaves no room for dissent or disagreement. It says there's no room for debate.
You can't tell the truth anymore.
We're whitewashing the true history of America. That's not the true history of America. Critical race theory is a lying history of America.
Once again, the panic is fueled by a bunch of bullshit horror stories.
A whistleblower explains how critical race theory is actually coming for your toys.
Critical race theory isn't just in schools. Now it's infecting our medical system.
A lot of these horror stories come from Christopher Rufo, a right-wing activist who's funded by a lot of the same groups that started the political correctness panic. And once again, it goes mainstream.
A critical look at critical race theory.
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory.
Protests erupt in school board meetings across the country.
Protests related to critical race theory.
And just like with cancel culture and wokeism, critical race theory means whatever you want it to mean. Critical race theory is when you acknowledge that racism exists.
That ideology, which is part of critical race theory, by the way, really only white people can be racist.
Critical race theory is when you want black people to become judges.
Ketanji Brown Jackson is what your country looks like on critical race theory.
Critical race theory is when you want criminals to run free.
Take things like critical race theory, all of those things that try to get white people to feel guilty. Then you can defund the police, you can put dangerous criminals out, and nobody will say anything. They'll just hang their head and hope you don't call them a nasty name.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Critical race theory took the vague anxiety around political correctness and turned it into a real political project. 35 states proposed or passed legislation to limit critical race theory in schools, including banning courses that make any individual feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex. As the scam artist behind the CRT panic told The New Yorker, political correctness is a dated term. The other frames are wrong too. Cancel culture is a vacuous term and doesn't translate into a political program. Woke is a good epithet, but it's too broad, too terminal, too easily brushed aside. Critical race theory is the perfect villain. But why stop at schools? If we can ban teachers from acknowledging inequality in the classroom, why not come up with a term that lets us ban it everywhere? DJ, spin that shit.
DEI, in this case, stands for divisive, erroneous, and insidious.
Minorities are in control.
The DEI agenda has taken hold of these major institutions in American life.
They're silencing conservatives.
They want to control language, instill fear, and enforce rules with explicit and implicit threats.
You can't tell the truth anymore.
Does Harvard value veritas or truth, or does Harvard value DEI and having the right race and gender symbolism at the top of its university hierarchy?
The term goes mainstream, yada, yada, yada. Look at the chart. There's always a chart.
Now there are a lot of people of color who are very concerned about a DEI agenda. Suddenly it's offensive
I will
to
say
use the language DEI.
It becomes a campaign issue for lazy politicians.
I will eliminate all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across the entire federal government.
And you're never going to see this coming, but...
There is something going on here, to come full circle here, that is very reminiscent of Mao's Cultural Revolution, with DEI officers as the Red Guard.
As of March 2024, more than 30 states have introduced bills banning or limiting DEI initiatives. Some of these bills address anything remotely related to diversity, equity, or inclusion, like the bill passed in Florida, which explicitly prohibited any state, college, or university from advocating for DEI or engaging in any political or social activism. The panic over DEI isn't a dog whistle, it's a goddamn megaphone. It starts off as complaints about job trainings and corporate sensitivity, but pretty soon they're arguing that you shouldn't trust non-white doctors.
This is going to ruin medicine. You will now go into a doctor and not know what merits by which they became a doctor.
They argue that you shouldn't trust planes flown by female pilots.
You want to believe that the people who are flying the plane are the best people for the job. But if Boeing is thinking about race or gender, then that's inevitably going to lead to safety issues.
God, this whole thing feels like we're stuck in the darkest time loop. Wokeism is cancel culture.
CRT is cancel culture.
Cancel culture is political correctness.
Cancel culture is just weaponized political correctness.
DEI is wokeism.
DEI is critical race theory.
Critical race theory. Critical gender theory. Critical whatever.
Let's just fire all the minorities.
The right wants us to believe that we're facing some radical new culture war, but the truth is that we've been having the same argument for 30 years now. Just compare how Fox News talked about DEI now to how the former head of the KKK used to talk about affirmative action in the 90s.
We are a nation that's based upon merit, that's based upon excellence, that's based upon the American dream.
You should be judged on your abilities and your merit, not on your race. When we stop judging people by their abilities and start judging people by only their racial background, we back away from freedom and true equality in America.
My brothers, sisters, and siblings in Christ, I fear we are stuck in a time loop. The far right knows that arguing against social progress directly isn't great optics. It's tough to look like you're the good guys and defend racist airline commercials using the N-word and profiling Muslims. So instead they have to keep inventing boogeymen like political correctness, wokeness, and DEI, reframing the same old fights over and over and over again to make them seem like they're big new threats.
This is discrimination on the basis of race, just in another direction.
It's like picking at a scab. Left alone, most Americans would eventually get used to seeing minorities at the workplace or not using slurs. It's hard to keep giving a shit about this after a while. These boogeymen are how the right convinces them to keep giving a shit, to keep picking at the scab.
It's time to cancel culture and wipe out wokeism once and for all.
And if you're picking at a scab, it doesn't heal, it gets infected. The power of these non-reality-based movements is that they appeal to our deepest held, most primitive prejudices, our classism, sexism, racism, perversions based on the fear of complexity or change. So the propaganda contains much of what we already yearn to believe. Its subversive message is that it's okay to believe what we want, to believe lies. And part of the reason why this propaganda works is because liberals keep falling for it. After Kamala lost the election, liberal commentators immediately began blaming wokeness, using the same talking points that you'd see on Fox News.
They also found that voters didn't just want Harris to distance herself from Biden, they wanted her to distance herself from what they believe the entire Democratic Party has become, a Portlandia sketch.
Within days, op-eds were blaming the loss on Democrats' identity politics.
Some Democrats are finally waking up and realizing that woke is broke.
They blamed her loss on political correctness. They blamed her loss on wokeness. They blamed her for being too nice to trans people, which is crazy because that's exactly what they did with gay marriage after Kerry lost in 2004. Have I mentioned that we're stuck in a fucking time loop? It's a rigged game. The right creates the panic, hijacks the news cycle, and then forces the left to play defense, always worried that we're too woke, too politically correct to win elections, as if this entire conversation wasn't invented by conservative think tanks.
Try making too woke be a cancelable offense.
And it's going to happen again. Eventually, DEI won't be new and sexy enough to play the role of big, scary threat, and they'll need to rebrand the same racial panic all over again. And as long as liberals keep taking the bait, they'll stay stuck in the loop, playing their game, turning on each other while the right rolls back the most basic attempts at social progress. As it turns out,
the only winning move is not to play.
How about a nice game of chess?